I first met Chase, or Michael, depending on who you ask or what documents you're inspecting, in 2019 when I moved into a falling apart house in Tempe, Arizona. It was the worst house I've ever lived in up until that point. Hmm. The roof tiles crumbled off the sides like milk-soaked Oreos. The smell of the nearby canal wafted up every pipe whenever you'd flush the toilet or rinse your dishes in the sink. Whenever I pass it now, I remember what happened there and how the night shifted from scene to scene like a bad stage play, and how the tint of the cop lights flitted in the vestibule, how the next day's twilight was calmer than calm, almost like reality finally became itself, and the world existed on and on for you and me and everyone who didn't die. Yeah. I met my two new roommates sometime in the early afternoon. Marty, an early 30 something who looked a bit like a miniature schnauzer version of Ed Kemper, and Chase, who shared Marty's mustache and glasses and looked similar to Marty except slightly taller and with a typical skinny fat millennial physique that seems so fashionable these days. Marty decided on wearing standard human attire, so stock, I don't recall it. Chase decided on whitey tighties and a plain white t-shirt and socks with puke green sandals. Now that's an outfit you remember, although I mostly remember it because it's all I ever saw him wear for the next few months. When I introduced myself to Marty, he shot me a goofy smile and said, "Hi, I'm Marty," a remarkably familiar human greeting. When I introduced myself to Chase, I said, "Hey man, how's it going?" And he did not say anything back and just stared at me like I was an idiot for trying to introduce myself to my new roommates. I assume he was thinking, why would you even say hi to anybody ever? You should just stare at them blankly like you're being possessed by a ghost or disassociating on DXM. I was now living with two mustached men in the ghetto of Tempe, Arizona, only one of whom seemed tangibly lifelike. You've never been subjected to a fate this cruel. Over the next few months, I tried to adjust to the situation. I got an all right job. I had a couple of pseudo girlfriends. Let's call them Banana and Itney. I became passable acquaintances with Marty. We liked shit talking our landlord, who was some fake chic son or nephew. We didn't know. All we knew is he was in his mid 20s and a bit of a Ponzi cunt, and he owned multiple houses somehow. I woke up every day cursing God for not being born the son of some Saudi Arabian oil tyrant. I only ever saw Chase in glimpses. He'd stand in the backyard or driveway in his aforementioned attire, smoke a cigarette, like I'm doing now, ogling the street. He only ever looked forward. He didn't move when he smoked, except to put the cigarette to his lips and to exhale. He looked straight ahead, only straight ahead, and he didn't move, like the external world couldn't or didn't affect him. In these moments, he seemed to be in a causal phantom, profoundly bizarre. It unsettled me more than anything in recent memory, and I'd come home and he'd be smoking and he'd be fixedly glaring forward to the street, and there was never any deviance to this, not even a brief alteration. He never stamped out his cigarettes either. He didn't throw them. He just let them fall from his hand as if he was never smoking in the first place, and just let them smolder there in the backyard gravel. I tried talking to him many times, and it was always the same response. Uh, that is, there was never a response, or even the beginnings of one. Not a wiggle, not a whimper. Or there was Chase looking at me like I was an exhibit at a museum, or maybe thinking I was some schizoid affectionate of his own consciousness. I don't know. I'll never know. I'll never know. But a few weeks into this, I asked Marty what was up. Marty had no idea. He just said Chase never spoke to anybody. He said he had never had a single conversation with Chase, and whenever he tried, Chase just peered at him. Marty had never even heard him speaking on the phone despite living with him for a year. So I asked the landlord what was up, and the landlord said that Chase seemed perfectly normal when he began renting the room and that nothing was the matter. Maybe he just doesn't like you guys, he told us. Or maybe you're being too loud with your girlfriends, he told me. I asked if Chase was developmentally challenged, and the landlord resoundingly said, absolutely not. Whenever I brought over Itney or Banana, Chase would grunt, gutturally grunt, warthogishly grunt. This was the only living earthly communication he ever attempted with me. We'd walk into the kitchen where he would be seated eating Kix or Pops, one of those corn-hued globule cereals. He would immediately grunt in dissatisfaction at us and storm off to his bedroom, which was only 3 or so feet away, and it was attached to the kitchen. There were a couple of occasions where he looked over at Banana and just shook his head. She told me this made her feel uncomfortable, and I just told her, I don't know what to tell you, babe. At night, sometimes he'd leave his door open, and he'd be sat at his quadruple monitors, basked in the eternal blue glow, typing maniacally, and sweating thick, noticeable from a great distance, droplets from his throat. And every now and then, rarely, but sometimes, laughing. And laughing with purpose, with actual humanesque joy. Like he meant it. Like he really, really wanted to be doing it like everyone else does. Laugh. One night, after a run of the old Italian opera with Itney, there was a bang on my door. We both bolted up to dress ourselves, and I opened the door. And when I opened it, nobody was there. I went to Marty's room and asked him if I was being too loud, and he said I didn't hear anything. So I went to Chase's room and banged on his door, and he didn't answer. Through the door, I said something like, hey, man, if you have any issues with me or if I'm being too loud, we can talk about it. I'll keep it down from now on. I apologize if I disturbed you. A couple of weeks later, after a nightcap with Whitney, who left dissatisfied as usual, I went to sleep thinking about how awesome I am and about how great I was finally doing despite my unfortunate living situation. And I drifted to slumbering bliss on a canoe to dreamland. And on this canoe, I heard a loud bang. I did not register it. It sounded like someone dropping a box of tools in the garage, or maybe it was just fireworks outside. I did not care or know or care to know. And then there were many louder bangs and many more louder ones, and this time these bangs were Marty knocking on my door. I opened it and he said, I think Chase just killed himself. And I said, what? Yeah, there was a loud bang from his room. He said his door's locked. So Marty and I both bum rushed Chase's door. When the door opened, Chase was laying with his head sideways in an empty suitcase. Shirtless, whitey tighties, faucet of blood slapping and growing on the felt liner, while he groaned horribly, unearthly moans that sounded as if he was trying to will himself back to life. They sounded like regret and immediacy, and they went on echoing in the house for far too long, 5, maybe 10 minutes, until the paramedics removed him. Marty called 911 right away, of course. I, I just stared in disbelief. We were told later that he didn't die on the ride to the hospital, but he died at the hospital at age 26. And so I can only assume he groaned the whole way there. And in some callous, fucked up way, those groans were the most communication I ever had with Chase, one way or another. He shot himself in the temple with a 9mm Glock. Chase was not thinking of where he was pointing the gun. If he had maybe consulted me prior, I would have told him to shoot himself in the roof of his mouth, as the bullet has the best chance of hitting your brainstem and killing you instantly. Or maybe I would have said something facile and placid like, suicide is not the answer, bro. Just don't do it, man. Chase's death was my first true introduction to violence and death and finite realities. And now when I see some poor coyote flattened on the asphalt or a dead fish in an aquarium, I see Chase dying there with his head draining into a suitcase, emitting sounds so pitch sad and terrible they never leave the slivers they filled. They're now a part of that room and that house, the tributaries of poorly caulked walls. They're a part of my pathways, and as much as I've wanted them gone, I kind of savor them being around, if only to appreciate the mistakes I've not yet made. And the footsteps I feel compelled to follow on days when my defeat can be eaten from the ethers. Marty and I were separated and interrogated by the police, and I couldn't talk much. I said the initial bang didn't sound like a gunshot, and it didn't. I said I just ignored it. I fell back asleep until Marty woke me up. And of course, they concluded a suicide in less than an hour. I called Banana to pick me up as I didn't want to stay at that house anymore, and she did, and I love her for that. I love her for that forever. We went back to her place, and I smoked an entire pack of her yellow American spirits, and she tried to calm me down. She gave me some vegan pizza she was saving for lunch the next day. I think you need it more than I do, given the circumstances, she said. She laid next to me and hugged me, and I almost cried, but I didn't. I realized I would have mostly been crying at the shock of it all, not at the situation itself. And I did not know Chase or even like Chase, and he certainly didn't like me. Chase was alien. Chase was a foreign spy. Chase was inhuman bourgeois. Chase was an apparition who just didn't exist within the realm of cause and effect, the determined lines of reality like the rest of us do. What would I have cried over? He didn't even acknowledge I existed except for when he banged on my door or shook his head in disgust at my half girlfriend. So the next day, Chase's uncle came over and I gave him my condolences. His uncle did not seem sad. He seemed hurried, rushed, annoyed at the inconvenience of his dead nephew. And I asked him if he noticed Chase behaving strangely recently, and the uncle said, Chase? His name's Michael. And I said, the landlord told us his name is Chase. The uncle said, Chase is his middle name. And I said, okay, so has Michael been acting strangely? And he said, no, no, of course not. Do you want his computer? And I said, what? And he said, well, we're just going to throw the stuff away. Do you want to buy some of the stuff in his room? I said, you want me to buy his computer? And he said, well, it's just going to go to the trash if you don't want it. I'll let you guys look through it and sort it out amongst yourselves if you want anything. And I said, I don't think I want his stuff. I think you should have his stuff, or maybe his mom should have his stuff. And he says, his mother is on vacation right now and she wouldn't answer the phone. Lord have mercy. So I stayed with Banana a couple of days. Couldn't find a new place, so reluctantly went back to the house. The landlord was ripping up the tile in the kitchen and replacing it. He told me no one can know about this because it would significantly devalue the house. A couple days later, Banana came over and excitedly told me we owe it to ourselves to inspect Chase's room and his stuff. Computers aren't cheap, she said. Perfectly good monitors? Yeah. So despite my reservations, we did. On his desk, we found post-it notes and notebooks full of some esoteric math scribbles neither of us could understand, cryptography and set theory, we think, but neither of us were very sure. In his closet, we found three 9mm pistols, a brand new AR-15, and thousands of 5.56 rounds. The box is stacked up to about the height of my chest. Without hesitating, Banana said, maybe this was all for the best? And to this day, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if Chase should have done this or why he had an AR-15 with a fuck ton of ammo or why he didn't act like a human being. I don't know if anything I did ever affected him one way or another. If he hated me or if he knew I even existed. I don't know if my half girlfriends destroyed something in him. I don't know if he was planning to kill me and Marty and my girlfriends or other people, even though he sure seemed the type. And then if he was planning that, should I be glad he's dead? Should I not feel anything? Should I consider this a bullet dodged? Pun intended. Should I think Chase killing himself was actually his humanity bubbling forth, calling out to itself, stopping whatever strange dark beacon was signaling into his head? Did he make the right call? Did he, after whatever dispossessed strange life he had that led him to these thoughts and these moments, genuinely free himself? I don't know. I don't know. I'll never know. And I haven't seen Banana or Idney or Marty in 4 years. But I think about Chase every now and then when I pass this house. I think about how he used to drink milk straight from the jug. I think about the way his glasses used to fog up when he was laughing at the computer monitors in his room. I think about the way he'd stare out at the road, standing there hunchbacked in his whitey tighties, knowing we didn't and couldn't know what he knew. So that's that, folks. I hope you enjoyed. And if you have anything in mind that you'd like to hear, please let me know.